Week 3 of the 2022 college football season is wrapped up, and today, as we begin to look forward to Week 4, I'll be giving you guys my updated college football rankings for this 2022 season. And Week 3, definitely a very eventful week in college football. We saw some big surprises, and we're starting to figure out which teams are the main contenders of this 2022 season. So that said, I'll be giving you guys my updated rankings here today for Week 4. Let's get started with 1 through 7. And nothing too much changes in the top 7. Georgia remains number 1 after their very dominant win over South Carolina. They beat them 48-7, and quite honestly, I think it's pretty obvious now, especially considering how Oregon played against BYU and the way Georgia played against Oregon in Week 1. I mean, the Bulldogs are definitely the best team in the nation right now at 3-0. Ohio State beat Toledo 77-21. I do have the Buckeyes at number 2. I had them at 2 last week as well. I think they're slightly better than Alabama. Honestly, the Crimson Tide are right there. I think Ohio State and Alabama are pretty much tied for that number 2 position. But Ohio State, definitely a very talented team. They ran up the score against Toledo, and definitely looking forward to seeing how Ohio State does this upcoming week when they take on Wisconsin. And then, of course, Wisconsin being a team that's got, I mean, offensively, they're not very good, but their defense is definitely one of the top in the Big Ten. So, we'll get to see Ohio State's top-tier offense going up against a good defense. Alabama beat Louisiana Monroe 63-7. They're also still undefeated. Obviously, Alabama had that close game against Texas in Week 2, and that's kind of what bumped Alabama down. But definitely the top 3 are definitely, I mean, there's a big gap between the top 3 and the rest of the nation right now, and you could even argue that with Georgia and the rest of the nation right now. Oklahoma's number 4 for me. I did swap Michigan and Oklahoma this week. I decided to move the Sooners up to number 4. They beat Nebraska on the road 49-14. Very dominant win. I mean, they had 49 points, and it was barely the middle of the third quarter. So when the Sooners could have ran up the score big time against Nebraska, and that was just a rout of Nebraska there. So for Oklahoma, huge win. They're moving up 1 into the top 4 this week. And the Sooners got K-State this upcoming weekend, so we'll get to see them play a conference game coming up here in Week 4. Of course, you got Michigan. They beat UConn 59-0. Michigan, I think, is a really good football team. They've been excellent in their first 3 games, but they haven't played anyone. I mean, they've played Hawaii, Colorado State, and UConn, 3 of the worst teams in the FBS, pretty much. So, I mean, Michigan's strength of schedule is incredibly weak so far, but once we get to see Michigan play some good teams, I think we'll obviously have a good idea of whether they're for real or not. And Michigan, I really think, is a top 5 team. I had them number 4 last week. I just think Oklahoma, with their strength of schedule, now they can be moved ahead of Michigan for now. But the Wolverines are definitely not far behind. USC is number 6. They beat Fresno State 45-17. And definitely a solid win for USC there. And the Trojans are for real, if you ask me. That's a team that is extremely well-rounded. They are very talented, and I mean, offensively, they're excellent. On defense, they are extremely talented, and they've got tremendous depth. And that's a team I said all offseason long. USC, they're going to be good, not just because of Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley, but also, I mean, you got to look around. I mean, that's a team that did really well in the transfer portal. They also got Travis Dye, running back from Oregon, Jordan Addison from Pitt, receiver who has come around. I mean, USC is a team that I think is extremely, I mean, they're a very real contender for the college football playoff. That is probably the best team in the Pac-12, quite honestly. And the Pac-12 actually has some really good teams this season. I mean, USC, obviously, you got Utah, who has been good, who's got tremendous talent. Oregon's pretty good as well. So, I mean, Pac-12 is actually a pretty decent conference this season. And there's a good chance that we see a Pac-12 team in the playoff at this rate. Oklahoma State's number 7. They beat UAPB 63-7. Took care of an FCS opponent there, and Oklahoma State is looking really good heading into Week 4. They are 3-0. Moving on to 8 through 14, Kentucky comes in at number 8. They beat Youngstown State 31-0. Took care of them, an FCS opponent, and Kentucky is really coming around. That's a team that is very impressive going into Week 4. They're undefeated. Of course, Kentucky, they beat Florida back in Week 2 on the road, which was an impressive win, and Kentucky's a team that definitely should be in the top 10 right now. Kentucky's a team, too. I mean, they got a few tests coming up. We'll find out a lot about Kentucky when they play Ole Miss on the road in a couple of weeks. They also got Tennessee coming up in a few weeks. So, yeah, Kentucky's a team that's got tremendous talent. Yeah, but it's going to be fun seeing which teams are for real moving forward. as we begin to look forward to conference play. Utah's number 9. They beat San Diego State 35-7, and I really like Utah. I understand they lost in week 1. They're a 2-1 football team, but I mean, and I even called that loss in week 1. I couldn't express how much of a trap game that was for Utah there going on the road to Gainesville in week 1. But Utah's a team that has got so much talent. They've got tremendous depth. Cam Rising, really like that team offensively. Even on defense, they got a lot of talent. So Utah is still a team that I think could be a big contender. I mean, and we'll once again find out a lot as we head into conference play here. But Utah got them at number 9. The AP poll has them slightly lower, down to number 13 for week 4. But I do think Utah is deserving of number 9 for this week. Clemson's number 10. Now, Clemson's a team that I'm very cautious on to this point. I haven't been impressed with Clemson to this point. I mean, they're 3-0. They've won their games, which is what matters. But the way that they've won their games, it just hasn't been terribly impressive to me. They had a close game, or it wasn't really close, but at first it was close against Louisiana Tech. And of course, they pulled away at the end, kind of similar to Georgia Tech. I mean, that game was way too close for a long time. And Georgia Tech is they're not a good football team. And so for it to be close as long as it was there kind of concerns me a bit. I mean, if Clemson can't start quickly, that's going to come back to bite in a few conference games. And they go on the road in week 4 to Wake Forest. So we're going to see Clemson play a good opponent, finally a good opponent in week 4. I mean, Louisiana Tech's not very good, and they allowed 20 points there. They still won by 4 touchdowns. But my point is, I mean, even the Furman game, 35-12, I just haven't been terribly impressed by Clemson to this point. So I got them at number 10. But if they win the next 2 weeks, I mean, they got Wake Forest and NC State coming up. If they win the next 2 weeks, you'll definitely see them in the top 5 for me. Then you got Tennessee, number 11. I really like Tennessee. That's a team that offensively is extremely strong. They beat Pitt in week 2, which Pitt is a good football team. And, I mean, they put 59 up on Ball State in week 1, 63 up on Akron. Tennessee's a team that could be a dark horse contender in the East Division. Not saying that they're going to be Georgia out, but Tennessee could definitely cause some noise up there. And so I got them at number 11 this week. Arkansas's number 12. They beat Missouri State, but that game was scary close for a long time. It looked like Missouri State had a chance to pull off what would be just a massive upset. Bobby Petrino, a former Arkansas coach with major controversy. I mean, wow, that would have been quite an upset there if Missouri State would have beaten Arkansas. But in the end, Razorbacks got the win, which I'm sure Razorback fans are very relieved about. Beat them by 11, even though it is way too close. But Arkansas, I do want to move them down 2 positions to allow Tennessee to jump them, and also Utah as well. But yeah, Arkansas is still a team that's got a lot of potential, and we'll continue to find out more about them in the coming weeks. And that's kind of the thing about the teams from, I'd say, 8 to 12, is all those teams have got tremendous potential, but we just haven't seen that quite yet. So we'll be able to find out soon whether those teams are for real or not. Penn State's number 13. They beat Auburn 41-12. Went to Auburn and took them out. Auburn's a team that looks like a mess right now, and Penn State on the flip side is looking pretty good. They're moving up 4 positions this week. I've had Penn State ranked decently high, definitely higher than the AP poll the past few weeks. And so Penn State moved up 8 positions in the AP poll to number 14. NC State's number 14. They beat Texas Tech 27-14. Good win for them. Texas Tech isn't a bad team, so that was a good win there for NC State, beating them by 13, moving up 2 positions this week. Yeah, definitely an interesting matchup for NC State coming up here in a couple weeks when they take on Clemson. Moving on to 15 through 21, Ole Miss beat Georgia Tech 42-0. Took care of them. Definitely a very dominant win there for Ole Miss, and they're 3-0, moving up 5 positions to 15 this week. Oregon is entering back in the rankings after beating BYU 41-20. They took care of them. And Oregon's a team, I mean, they got obliterated by Georgia in week 1. And honestly, that team, they just looked bad in week 1. But turns out, in the past couple of weeks, Oregon's looked pretty good, especially against BYU. So the Ducks could still be a contender in the Pac-12. BYU number 17, they're moving down 9 positions to number 17. I had them at number 8 last week, which you could consider to be Definitely definitely high considering how they played this past week. But BYU, I still think is a really talented team. Really like Jaron Hall. Really like that offense. That team is definitely got major potential, but that's just a tough break, tough loss there for BYU. Wasn't their day, so they're moving down. Baylor's number 18. They beat Texas State 42-7. They're just behind BYU, of course, because the Cougars did beat them a couple of weeks ago. But Baylor's still a good football team, 2-1. And definitely a team that's still got tremendous potential, but obviously that loss to BYU is keeping them down a bit lower. Washington comes in the rankings at number 19 after a huge win over Michigan State, 39-28. I don't think most people expected Washington to be as dominant as they were in that game, but I mean the Huskies, they look good going up against a very talented Michigan State team. And I mean, once again, I mentioned this before, the Pac-12 is looking pretty good right now with USC, Utah, Oregon, Washington. I mean, those four teams are looking excellent going into week 4. So the Pac-12 definitely has got a chance here to have a couple of teams make a run at the college football playoff. And who knows, the Huskies could be one of them. Michigan State, number 20, they lost to Washington. They're moving down 7 positions after that loss. Definitely disappointing one, and Michigan State's going to need to rebound after that one, as there are multiple concerns with them now. They aren't even in the AP poll. They dropped out from number 11. I definitely still think they should be ranked. I got them at 20, but for now, I mean, Michigan State's a team that is definitely on standby until we see them be impressive again. Texas A&M beat Miami 17-9. Solid win for them after a tough and very stunning loss to App State. But they definitely looked a lot better in this matchup, and only allowing 9 points to Miami is impressive. So they're 2-1 heading into week 4. Let's move on to 22 through 25. We got Texas at 22. They beat UTSA 41-20, 2-1. They lost Alabama in week 2, but they kept it extremely close, which was why it was an impressive loss for Texas, you could say. But Longhorns number 22 for this week, and we'll definitely see how they do moving forward. That's a team that's they've looked good so far this season, so they show potential for sure. Minnesota's 23. I do like the Golden Gophers quite a bit. They beat Colorado 62-10 in their week 3 matchup. In Minnesota, they've played a pretty poor schedule so far. Strength-wise, they've played 3 poor teams, but they've been extremely dominant in all 3 games. So Minnesota offense, that's a team that is really promising, and we'll find out once again a lot more about them as they start to play good opponents here in the next few weeks. But Minnesota is a team to definitely keep an eye on. I have been impressed by the Golden Gophers so far this season. Miami's 24. They lost to Texas A&M 9-17 on the road in week 3. And so they're moving down, but Miami's still a team that I still think shows tremendous potential. So we'll see how they do in ACC play. Florida's 25. They beat South Florida 31-28, but it was way too close. I mean, South Florida's a team that, I mean, they're definitely better this season versus how they were last year. But still, either way, I mean, it was a game that shouldn't have been that close, but still going to keep Florida in the top 25 as they're 2-1 and still have got that impressive win over Utah on the resume. First 5 out, Wake Forest 26, Florida State 27, and Pitt 28. So 3 ACC teams right knocking on the door. Kansas 29. Kansas, I've never been able to rank in the top 30, but I'm finally able to. Kansas is a team that I really like. That's a team that finally, I mean, the way they looked against Houston going on the road, I wasn't sure they're going to win that game, but Kansas looked impressive. That's a team that Lance Leipold has done a really good job with, and they're taking on undefeated Duke in week 4. So we'll see if Kansas can get up to 4-0, and if they do, there's a good chance I'll have them ranked for week 5. But then Washington State, can't forget about them at number 30. Dropped out this week, Wake Forest. I had them at 21. I just haven't been terribly impressed by Wake Forest, so I'm going to keep them out of the rankings for now. And then Kansas State was 22. They had a very disappointing and stunning loss to Tulane. So that said, that's going to wrap it up for my rankings here today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on these rankings, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.